why aren't I getting any stronger? Chances are you're not even actually strength training. You're doing some kind of resistance weight training, but you're not actually strength training. So if you want to know more, stick around for this mini cast episode. All right, so I want to kind of get something straight. When you look at the world of weight training, there's a bigger umbrella, and the bigger umbrella is resistance training. And a lot of people just default right to, well, that's strength training. Weight training equals strength training. And in essence, it does. But really what you have is you have resistance training. Resistance training can be so many things. It can be bands, weights, cables, body weight, anything like that. And then you have many different facets and different types of resistance training under that. So it's not all actually strength training, although we can kind of put that as a general label to slap on it, but not all weight training is actually true strength training when it comes to specific fitness training and certain types of goals, progressive overload and things like that. So when we look at the world of weight training, there's a lot of different styles, there's a lot of different techniques, there's a lot of different approaches. But what I want to do is I want to break some of those things down and give you guys what that actually is, and then help you figure out if you've been hitting the weights and maybe you're getting bigger but you're not actually getting stronger, and you kind of confuse the two, or maybe you're getting leaner and you're not getting bigger, which it's a different effect for everyone, but I just want to help break that down. So okay, so if we're looking at strength training being its own specific set, we have to look at kind of the breakdown of each category of weight training, resistance training as a bigger umbrella, like I said. So the first one you have that really falls, and we'll just kind of go in order of what would be progressively harder in a sense. And that first one is endurance training. So endurance training lends itself to, well, that very thing, endurance, having more stamina overall. And what that's going to look like is roughly when you're training with your weight sets, your cables, your resistance, whatever it is, a lot of percentages are based off of what we call your 1 RM, your 1 rep max, based on that exercise. So for instance, let's say you're doing a bicep curl and doing endurance, you're going to do about 40-50% of your 1 RM, and you're going to be doing sets and volume sets like 3 by 15, maybe 3 by 20. And that's going to be relatively lightweight. Like I said, 40 to 50%. If your 1 max curl is 40, then 50% is 20. And you're going to be doing high reps with that. Sometimes we start out at like 3 by 10, that's like a base strength, but then you work up to endurance where you're doing like 3 sets of 15, 3 sets of 20, things like that. So the next one I want to get into is going to be actual strength training. And this is where you're going to see the difference. This is really a breakdown. So actual strength training is going to be pushing about 85 to 90% of your 1 RM. So let's go, say your 1 RM max is 50 pounds, right? So you're looking at doing probably 40 to 45 pounds of 3 by 5 for your volume set. So again, strength training is going to be a lower rep set at a higher weight, and a lot of people get that flipped. They actually get it mixed up with the next one, which is actually hypertrophy. And there's something interesting I'll share about actual strength training versus hypertrophy, which is muscle mass building specifically. There's been interesting studies done on it. I'll share that in just a little bit. So hypertrophy training is actually going to be closer to about 70 to 80% of your 1 RM max. You're going to do, what's really, really good about hypertrophy training is there's many different ways you can do it. The standard sets, I like to call it for hypertrophy, are going to be something like 4 by 12. And you're going to do it again at that 70 to 80% of your 1 RM max. Let me give you an example of some weight sets, what you might be at for these different categories. Again, for example, let's just take bicep curl. Your 85% of a 50-pound curl would be about 42.5 pounds, roughly. If you're doing 75%, you were looking at 37.5, 35 pounds. And if you're doing endurance sets, again, that higher volume, lighter weight, you're looking at 32, 30, maybe 28 pounds, give or take. So that's the breakdown. So anyways, now to bring us back to hypertrophy. So you kind of have your standard hypertrophy sets, volume like 4x12, maybe 4x15 if you're getting crazy. When you add those reps up, it's quite a bit. Other types of hypertrophy sets are like fail sets. We like to call those drop sets too. We have things called negative sets, where basically you're putting the emphasis on the negative motion. And a lot of people, when they're working out or curling, they'll put a lot of power into that curl and then they'll just drop it and then power. But really, when we're working out, there's so much importance on the negative aspect. So even when you're training, if you're not specifically doing negative sets, it's important to have the control of that negative motion. It's just as much work and just as beneficial for your muscles. So when we do a negative set, you're slowly letting that weight down until you get to about that 90-95% extension, and then come back and do it again. But again, your emphasis is actually on controlling that negative. Other types of sets we have as iso sets, so isolation sets, isometric, where you're basically just holding a heavy weight for 10-15 seconds at a time, and that's your rep, right? And then you do that 10 to 15 second hold 3 times. So if you hold it 10-15 seconds, there's your rep set right there. So again, we have all these different types of hypertrophy weight training styles that come under that category. The last major one is what we call like power or explosive training. That's going to be a lot more sport specific. You're going to see that things like CrossFit, Olympic lifting, there's a lot of explosive high tempo. Not all your Olympic lifting is obviously high tempo as fast as you can. But I think CrossFit is a better example of that, where they're doing explosive high tempo moves, where it's not their max RM, but the weight is challenging, the weight is up there. That's probably going to be around that 75% of your 1 RM, and we're doing about 3 to 5 sets. So again, just to cover that, to recap, and then I'll tell you kind of interesting correlations, some studies that have been done. So we're looking at resistance training as a big umbrella, and under that we have endurance, we have strength, we have hypertrophy, and we have power. So those are your actual types of resistance and weight training that fall under that umbrella. Okay. So you say, okay, well, what's the point of each one? Okay, so all of them are important. Endurance for endurance, strength, you want to actually get stronger as you're lifting weights, working out. And then hypertrophy, muscle mass building. You want to build muscle mass as you're building strength. And actually they'll kind of go hand in hand with each other and complement each other as you're building and working. And you can have a week of strength, a week of hypertrophy, a week of strength, or a week of power, and alternate, or you can do days on and off, strength, hypertrophy, power, just kind of based on how you want to build it, how your coach is going to build it. So an interesting study was actually done either by ISSA or another group, and then it was published within ISSA, International Sports Science Association. And the study was done with a sample set of guys who were actual strength trainers. So their style of resistance weight training was strength training specifically. And then there was a set of hypertrophy guys. These guys were doing muscle mass building. And the same things apply earlier when I mentioned about those percentage ratios with your 1 RM and then your volume sets. So we have those strength training guys for the same period of training time, whether it was a month, couple months, 6 months, whatever, against guys who were doing hypertrophy training specifically. They wanted to see who was actually stronger in the end. And what the studies show is that actually the guys who did actual specific strength training were actually stronger than the guys who did hypertrophy training. And what that goes to show, and I love this, is because just because you're uber ripped and jacked doesn't mean you're actually as strong as you can be, or you're actually stronger than a guy who is not as jacked or not as muscular, have as big of a build. It might be leaner but stronger. And that can absolutely be true. Is it always true? No. A lot of times the guys with bigger muscle mass tend to be stronger. But when you have guys that are in maybe similar categories, your muscle mass and size doesn't always equate to strength. And I know some people are going to hate on that and you don't know what you're talking about. But I'm just telling you that this was a study done and it was an actual, those are the actual results that were collected. So again, I think that just goes to show that you really want to do both. You want to do muscle mass building. The more volume you have, the more space you have to build those stronger fibers. And so your muscles and fibers build, recover, and recoup in different ways based on your progressive overload, based on your volume training, and based on what your training approach is. So just kind of interesting. So just keep that in mind. Again, if you're like, hey, coach, I actually want to get stronger, what do I do? You can reach out to me. Visit alcfitnesstraining.com. Email me at ryan@alcfitnesstraining.com. Get in touch with me. I can build you a program, whatever you need. But otherwise, I just want to share this with you guys. Just be looking for more of these mini casts to come out as I kind of go through different interesting topics when it comes to actual personal training, because there's a lot of stuff out there. And it might be stuff that's kind of maybe kind of self-discovered. Guys have been in weight training for a lot and they know what they're doing. That's awesome. That's great. And then there's things that are scientifically based that come from actual personal training programs that are backed up with science and research. So anyways, I just want to share good knowledge with you guys, encourage you. If you're working out, getting fit, you're out there, get after it, keep going. If you've got this part of your life started, you got momentum, then that's awesome. Keep it going and just keep getting yourself out there. So, all right, we'll see you guys next time.